Today on Notsam Wrestling, everything coming off of Full Gear, who's going into the War Games, what can we expect at Survivor Series, Ronda Rousey makes an unexpected debut, and who is the future of AEW? This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling. Big week, but they're all big weeks. We have a lot to talk about, of course. We're going to talk about Full Gear. I just have so many pages of observations to make today. But I want to start with my man, Santos Escobar. If anybody gets it, Santos gets it. Now, not only, we'll talk about the storyline perspective in a minute. Because storyline perspective, he might have just listened to Notsam Wrestling last week and went, oh yeah, that's exactly it. Let me cut a promo explaining exactly that. But let's start with the details first. The fact that Santos comes out when he's a good guy, he's real happy. I mean, this guy had his own faction. Legado del Fantasma. And when it's time to bring back the LWO, when it's time for him to really take a back seat and allow Ray to be the leader, he's no problem. He's all smiles. Every time you see the guy, he's wearing an LWO t-shirt. And what does he do? The minute that he becomes a villain, the minute that he turns on Ray, quote unquote, by the way, if you really break it down, what happens? The guy comes out in a Tony Montana suit. No even reference to it, but somebody cross-checked it. I said, I knew I've seen that suit somewhere, and somebody else felt the same way, and I saw it on the internet. Somebody did a side-by-side photo. And just as Tony Montana is really picking up in business, the man who said, by the way, say goodnight to the bad guy. The original bad guy. The bad guy that Razor Ramon started calling himself the bad guy after. And what does Santos do? Well, if I'm going to be the bad guy, I'm going to be the bad guy. And he puts on a Scarface suit. Unbelievable. Because nobody told him to do that. Nobody sat Santos aside and went, hey, man, you know what I'm thinking? Buy a suit that looks exactly like Al Pacino in Scarface. And then wear that suit for your promo. No. He just showed up with it. He knew it would be awesome. But the promo itself, I thought, was awesome. The whole segment was great. First, basically making a case very similar to the one that we made here on Notsam Wrestling last week. That if you break down what has gone on between Santos Escobar and Rey Mysterio, Rey is in the wrong. I can't imagine watching, being by somebody's side for months and months and months, having your hero take you under his wing, embrace you after you wore his pants, as we pointed out last week, only to invite Carlito out of nowhere, who's even heard from this guy in the last 20 years, to invite Carlito to come out from under a rock, join what used to be your group, and then when there's a little bit of tension, watch this guy point the finger right at you, and Ray goes, hey, he makes a good point. He makes a good point. I'd be pretty upset myself. And then the LWO comes out. Joaquin Wilde is out there. Hey, man, you're out of line. You're out of line. I gave you guys life. I put the air in your lungs that allows you to breathe. And now you come out here and tell me how to conduct my business? So now we're left with this thing where it appears, because Ray's out, right? So it appears, at least for the time being, so it appears in the immediate, we've got Carlito that's actually out of nowhere going to be leading the LWO. We saw Carlito make a surprise appearance at Backlash in Puerto Rico, but we also saw Tio Savio. We saw Savio Vega make a surprise appearance there too. Does that mean Savio Vega's LWO? I don't know, week to week. But then all of a sudden, at the last pay-per-view, Carlito comes back, and now it doesn't feel wormy to you? It doesn't feel politicky to you? That this guy has shown up and all of a sudden has full control over the group, and you want me to believe that Carlito is the good guy here? You kidding me? The guy who just showed up a month ago has the whole group convinced that the guy who built the thing is a villain. And you want me to buy that the guy who's convincing the group that their former leader is a villain, that guy's a hero? Whoa. You haven't been around long enough to allow us to check your motivations. So I'll be cheering for Santos Escobar is what I'm trying to tell you. Survivor Series, it was made official. Santos versus Carlito. And the fact that we're already getting this match only 2 weeks in, less than two, basically, I guess 2 weeks in, right? Last week, the kind of dissolution. Week after that, Santos doubles down. We get the match announced. And then we've only got, Survivor Series this weekend. We've got one Smackdown. And then, boom, we get the match. And I've been advocating for stuff like this for a while. I feel like wrestling used to be severely lacking in long-term stories. And now that rubber band has snapped back so far that all we're getting is long-term stories. We don't have any of this stuff that's like, oh yeah, you are grabbing every bit of my attention week to week. Because that's the thing about long-term stories. If they don't grab your attention week to week, by the time they finally reveal themselves, you run the risk of people not caring anymore. I think a healthy combination of short-term and long-term storytelling is when professional wrestling is at its finest. And I think that short-term stories, when combined, can create a long-term story. I think that's the best. And I think that's what we're getting here, right? I don't... Survivor Series Carlito versus Santos is going to be by no stretch of the imagination a blow-off match by any means. I think it'll be the start of something. And I don't know how long Rey Mysterio is out for. I don't know what his calendar looks like in terms of, is he going to be back in 2 months? Are we going to take this all the way to WrestleMania? Are we going to get Santos and Rey at WrestleMania? Is the LWO going to turn on Carlito? Is Carlito going to turn on the LWO? I could easily see this being a thing where Carlito is proven to not be a great guy. The LWO has to go like, you know what, Santos, you were right. The LWO goes back to being baby faces without Carlito or Rey, because Rey's still gone. They take out Carlito. And then when Rey comes back, he's got to figure out where he stands. Maybe that's the time, if it's far enough down the road, for the LWO as a unit to turn heel on Rey. And so now we've gotten to WrestleMania, where you got Rey versus Santos with the heel LWO versus Rey Mysterio on his own. And who knows, maybe that's a retirement match. I don't know. We only say retirement matches because Rey's been around forever, but if this guy can go for another 5 years, let the guy go for another 5 years. All that said, historically, this is where the LWO should stand. Rey Mysterio, historically, being a part of the LWO makes, a little bit more sense, but not that much more sense than Sting coming out, having the NWO come out to help him at WrestleMania 31. Sting was the enemy of the New World Order. Sting was the only enemy that could fully stand up to the New World Order. Sting represented WCW. Rey Mysterio was not a member of the Latino World Order. In fact, the LWO's whole thing was trying to get Rey to join them, and Rey refusing it. He was the bane of the LWO's existence. The LWO being a heel faction in the 90s that was led by Eddie Guerrero. And Eddie Guerrero grabbed all the Latino superstars in WCW that were being used within the cruiserweight division, but were basically being kept in this cruiserweight bubble, where if you're in the cruiserweight division, you're in the cruiserweight division, and that's what you're doing. You're going to get spots on TV every single week. They're going to be important spots, but they're never going to branch outside of the cruiserweight division. It's just not going to happen. It's almost a sideshow, for lack of a better term. And so Eddie had enough, and he assembled all the luchadors together to form the LWO. But Rey wouldn't join them. And I know the way I'm setting this up, it's like, well, Rey would be the villain then, right? Because Eddie Guerrero's motives were pure, but not really, because Eddie Guerrero was uniting this group without honor. Now, all that said, this can go into our column of maybe Rey Mysterio has kind of been a villain this entire time. The fact that the LWO was brought together so that the luchadors could combine their power because the sum of all parts is greater than the value of the combination of each of those individual parts. And what could make that sum even larger is if Rey Mysterio were added to it, but Rey Mysterio was the only holdout. I mean, if we want to go back far enough, we could probably argue that Rey was in the wrong then too. That Rey, as nice as he is, as a character, may have pretty selfish motives. And if it's not his idea and he's not in charge, well, then he doesn't want to be a part of it. And with this new LWO drama, when his leadership is questioned, he backs away from that. He doesn't like his leadership being questioned. When his leadership is questioned, he's going to go to the guy who's building him up, who's hyping him up, instead of maybe the guy who's telling the truth. That's not a good quality in a leader. We'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. It's a movie. And speaking of movies, see that is a segue. That's what those are called. Those are called segues. Speaking of movies, I got to see the Iron Claw, the Von Erichs movie, this week. I thought it was a screening. It turned out to be the New York premiere of the Iron Claw. A24 invited me. And guys, I can't wait. This is not an advertisement, by the way. They didn't sponsor the podcast. But I am looking forward to everybody seeing it. And when I say everybody, I don't just mean the people who listen to this podcast. Because I would imagine most of us know the story. I'm surprised sometimes to find out that, well, maybe I'm wrong, right? There are a lot of people who send in emails that are like, I've been watching wrestling religiously for the last year. There are a lot of people who have started watching wrestling within the last year or two, and maybe they don't know the Von Erich story at all. I know there will be a lot of people in the theater that don't know the Von Erich story because there will be a lot of people who aren't wrestling fans that are going to this movie, and that's a good thing. It's an A24 movie. Excuse me. It's a Christmas release. It's Zac Efron. It's Jeremy Allen White. It's a big movie. And they did a really great job with it. I'm not going to spoil it at all because nobody's had a chance to see it yet. But they do a great job of telling a story through the lens of professional wrestling, I guess is the way to put it, without making it a wrestling story. It's a story that takes place in the world of pro wrestling. But ultimately, it's just a human story. And one of the most interesting, tragic, heavy human stories that you could possibly see. Anybody that knows the story of the Von Erichs is not wondering why they would make a movie about the story of the Von Erichs. I mean, it's more a head scratcher that it's taken this long to make a movie about the story of the Von Erichs. It's accurate enough. The kind of series of events are pretty much chronologically as they happened. Everything's pretty accurate. There are some parts of the movie where you know the scenes because you've seen them, whether it be in documentaries or YouTube footage or whatever it is, like that are kind of reenacted real life moments. Some of the stuff that like Mike Von Erich went through. But like not everything that Fritz Von Erich did as a promoter is in the movie. It's more, I feel like the focus is more on him as a father than as a promoter. And as wrestling fans, I think the stuff he did as a promoter is pretty telling as to the type of person that maybe he was. Also, Chris Von Erich, the youngest brother of the Von Erichs, is not in the movie. That's not really a spoiler because he's not referenced. He's just not part of the story. And I think that, while that is tragic in a sense, right? To find out that you're not even in the movie about your own family. Realistically, the tragedies in that family, there's so many of them that I feel like if you go without knowing the story, it might start to get tough within a 2-hour time frame. It might start to get tough figuring out, keeping track of all the horrible, horrible things that happened. But the movie was really well acted. The story is really well told. The Set design is amazing. It takes you right back to that world-class championship wrestling era. You've got Bruiser Brody represented in there, the Fabulous Freebirds, obviously, Ric Flair, obviously. Now, MJF is in the movie. He talked to us about the fact, I think he mentioned that when he did the podcast a year or so ago, but he's mentioned it elsewhere. And he is in the movie. It's very, very brief. Do not go to see this movie because you want to see MJF. It's very brief. But he plays Lance Von Erich. Yeah. He was named, though, executive producer. He's an executive producer on this film. So, I mean, look, regardless of how big the part is, the fact that MJF, at his age, with his experience, is in this movie that's going to be a massive movie, which I could see Zac Efron getting an Oscar for, is incredible. Just that if he were in one frame, it would be incredible. But the fact that he's an executive producer of this thing, that makes an impact, I think, in the industry. So we'll talk more about it once the movie comes out and everybody's seen it. We can all have an opinion about it. But yeah, I just wanted to, I know that I posted about it and a lot of people had responded to it. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned something about it and the fact that you should be excited about it. If you're excited about the Iron Claw and that Von Erichs movie, you absolutely should be excited. It's a really awesome thing for professional wrestling. Really awesome. And for Chavo Guerrero, but even more so for professional wrestling. And honestly, anything that's good for Chavo Guerrero is probably good for professional wrestling, right? So it is. It's great. I can't wait for you guys to see it. What I did see, and what I'm assuming a lot of you have seen, is Full Gear over the weekend. Now, Full Gear, it left me, and we'll talk about everything that happened there. Guys, forgive this quick interruption, but I'd like to thank ExpressVPN. You know, you can use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. This week, for example, you could have been using ExpressVPN to binge Fargo on Canadian Netflix. It's very, very easy to do. All you have to do is fire up the ExpressVPN app, change your location to Canada, refresh, and that's it. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think that you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. Look, I'm going to tell you what I did, okay? And you're going to relate to it. I got ExpressVPN, and this is true. I couldn't believe how fast it worked. I couldn't believe how easy it worked. And while I was excited because of all the benefits that it has to privacy and kind of just being able to do your thing without somebody monitoring you, the biggest deal to me was I'm back on the WWE Network. I lost the WWE Network years ago because I'm in the United States of America, but not anymore. Don't tell anybody. I was literally browsing the WWE Network yesterday. It was like a blast from the past. He said everybody in the UK has been enjoying the WWE Network for all this time. Guess what? Now I'm back on that bandwagon because ExpressVPN has everybody thinking I'm in the UK. Just like WWE Network, it works with all streaming services, Hulu, BBC iPlayer, you name it. It also works on all your devices, your phones, smart TVs, and more. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, use my link right now, expressvpn.com/notsam, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/notsam. expressvpn.com/notsam to learn more. But Full Gear left me with the realization that it is clear as day. You might as well get a voicemail from God letting you know who the future of this company is. If I am watching this show and I am investing in wrestlers the way I invest in stocks, and I go, I want to find the person who right now is the most affordable to invest in, but is going to have the most value on the back end, the person with the most potential ROI, return on investment, you might as well call Swerve ROI. There is maybe, I can't think, and maybe this is because we're right off Full Gear, But there's very few people in the business right now that I think have more potential in front of them than Swerve. And I am really happy that I was on the Swerve bandwagon for a long time. I was a fan of Swerve before he got to NXT, when he was wrestling in like CZW and stuff like that. I was super psyched when NXT signed him. I was a fan of Swerve in NXT. I was a fan of when he was in Hit Row. I mean, I loved all of it. But the stuff he's doing right now is like, it's almost as if you go, okay, we'll give you an opportunity. Show us what you can do. And the stuff that he's showing us is like, yeah, we didn't even know you could do this much. We had faith. We didn't know that we should have had even more. Because Full Gear was a great pay-per-view. And AEW hasn't missed with pay-per-views. There's no bad AEW pay-per-views. But Full Gear was better than the last pay-per-view. Full Gear was a really, really good pay-per-view. From top to bottom, I had a blast watching that. Tons of good matches on that show, whether it was the tag team ladder match, whether it was the Golden Jets versus the Young Bucks. I thought the main event was really, really great. But for me, even the opening 6-man was super fun. Edge and Darby and Sting together with Christian and what is the patriarchal trio or patriarch, whatever he calls them. Really great. Nick Wayne and Luchasaurus, of course. Nigel McGuinness was on fire last night. Nigel McGuinness, especially in the beginning of that show, so good on color commentary. But man, nothing on that show hit me the way Hangman Page and Swerve in a Texas death match hit me. And those Texas death matches can go one of two ways. I'm a death match fan. You know this. I've had Nick Gage on the show. I've gone to death matches live. I'm a Onita super fan. I've been a death match fan forever. I love Born to Be Wired in ECW. Okay, I've been a death match fan since I'm a kid. But there have been plenty of times in AEW where it's like, I mean, I was super psyched when it was Mox versus Omega in the Exploding Ring death match. I was like, this is awesome. But there have been plenty of times too where I'll watch matches in AEW that it's like, this is bloodletting for the sake of bloodletting. This is ridiculous. This is verging on being potentially bad for business. You know, you can't bring your family to this. You can't, and there's no justifiable reason for it. This wasn't one of those times. And I mean, this match was as bloody as any match I've ever seen in AEW, or I mean, on any terms, anywhere else. But the story was so amazing throughout this whole match. I was so invested throughout this whole match that I was like, yes, this is what it's all about. And by the way, me pumping up Swerve this much is not to take anything away from Hangman Page. But it's, I mean, at this point, it's almost like to say that Hangman Page is great would be like, yeah. He's a former AEW champion. We've kind of known that he was great for a really long time. But for me, I'm looking at Swerve, right? And I go, Swerve's a guy that was released by WWE. Swerve's a guy that was ready to go like, yep, I'm gonna put the time in. I'm going to be a WWE superstar, and I'm going to rise in the ranks of the WWE doing it their way. And they said, no, thank you. And there are a whole bunch of guys that they've done that with. And I mean, that's part of business. I don't think that's any, and a whole bunch of guys have ended up in AEW, and that's part of business too. And that's awesome. But I don't think when you look at it, like my two guys in AEW that were released by WWE are Malachi Black and Swerve. Love those. Love Malachi Black. Love Swerve. Love those wrestlers. But Swerve, I feel like, especially after last night, has the potential for AEW to prop him up as the one that got away. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's look at what WWE has done an incredible job with. They got their hands on Cody Rhodes. And Cody Rhodes was a big star in AEW. He was one of the founders of the company. He was an executive of the company. But what did WWE do? WWE put all of the energy that machine had into Cody Rhodes. By the way, knowing that Cody was going to be able to pay it off. They saw the potential return on investment in Cody Rhodes. And they said, let's go all the way with this guy. And within, no time, night one, I would argue, of Cody Rhodes showing up in WWE, he was instantly the biggest babyface in the industry. And he has remained so for the last year and a half. Nothing has taken him off that pedestal. To the point where not only did he get to the main event of WrestleMania, but people wanted him to win so badly that there are people that stopped watching WWE for a period of time. Most of them are back. Because they were so disappointed that their favorite good guy hadn't won at WrestleMania. That's how big they made Cody Rhodes. Look at Jade Cargill. Jade Cargill has showed up, and without ever entering a WWE ring, WWE has made it seem like, as of now, Jade Cargill is the biggest star in the world. I would argue that Jade Cargill is being, and AEW did not do her wrong in terms of making her look like a star. They put her on a pedestal, but WWE is investing. WWE is doing everything that they do to make a star. And before Jade Cargill has even it's been declared on what brand she's on, she is being portrayed as one of the top superstars that the industry has ever seen. And AEW let her get away. And AEW let Cody Rhodes get away. So what do we do here, right? I think Swerve is the one that AEW can go, this is the guy. This is the guy that you guys decided to let go. And we're going to prove that in AEW, he's a game-changing star. I don't think this means have a bunch of great matches with Swerve in it. Because you put Swerve on TV with people, and he's going to have great matches. I think this means building Swerve into a star. When I see Swerve, I see the guy that can take the title from MJF. I see an AEW world champion. And I see somebody that can be a credible threat to that championship. Not somebody who came from New Japan as a former world champion that's coming in. Not somebody who came from WWE as a former NXT world champion, Samoa Joe I'm talking about, who's coming in a star and going like, okay, I'm going to take you out. CM Punk, who's coming in a star, okay, I'm going to take you out. Nope. I'm talking about somebody that wasn't at the top of the industry and is now at the top of the industry. And in order to do this, I don't think you go, okay, cool, we're good. World's End, a month from now, Swerve is in the main event. No. Because you don't want to just go, okay, he had a great match at the pay-per-view, now he's the top guy. Because that'll be short-lived. What you want to do is take people on the journey. Commit to the journey now and go, we're going to bring him to the top of the industry within this company. Commit to that journey. And then commit to taking people with you on that journey. I think that MJF has his hands full with whatever story's going on his end. The Adam Cole stuff, the devil hasn't been revealed. Samoa Joe is still waiting in the wings. Wardlow is still waiting in the wings. All that we can give time to settle itself out. Because in the meantime, what I would do with Swerve is I would start turning Swerve into optically the biggest star in AEW. And this means having the biggest entrances. This means having impactful promos. This means creating moments where when Swerve is on screen, this is what you have to do. Like, make it so that every single time Swerve is on screen, you've got to see what's going to happen, whether it's an entrance, whether it's a promo, even if it happens to be a match. Make it so, oh boy, here we go, right? I think that you can build whatever story that you want to build, right? Leading into, I would say keep him out of the Continental Classic because the Continental Classic is about matches. And by the way, I'll talk about that because that looks like it's going to be awesome. Out of the Continental Classic, focus on one story. Whatever that story is, I honestly don't care what that story is. Find a top guy for Swerve to have a rivalry with. and tell a story, because you've already started, right? The Adam Page Swerve story is almost an outlier. Even people that don't give AEW the time of day have to admit the Swerve Adam Page stuff is interesting. And the way it's getting settled is awesome, right? So I think you move on from the Adam Page thing and you find a new high-profile opponent, whoever it is, for Swerve to have a big, big match with. And you don't put him in the main event of World's End, but you do put him in that slot that he had at this show, one of the last 3 matches. That's how AEW book shows. Those last 3 matches are the bangers. This time it was the Texas Death Match, it was the tag match, it was the main event world title match. He was in the second to last match, or the third to last match this time. Maybe make him the second to last match at World's End. But either way, make it seem like this is a big deal and convince people that you are paying tickets to see Swerve. To see Swerve and the whole show around Swerve, right? Keep him successful. And again, and you're going like, well, who would it be? It could be anybody. You know, kind of go over, maybe it's Orange Cassidy. I don't know if I want to put the international title on Swerve, but maybe it's Orange Cassidy. Right? Because you can tell a great story with, or maybe it's Mox. Hell, maybe it's Mox. Maybe you want to keep all the titles away from Swerve. Either of those 2 guys would work. If it's Mox, you know, this could be the first time that Mox is dealing with somebody that's kind of investing in torturing him. This could be the first time that Mox is dealing with somebody that wants to hurt Mox. Right? That Mox isn't the guy who's the aggressor here. Swerve is the aggressor with Mox. And you go to Swerve versus Mox, and you have Swerve beat Mox at World's End. And you're like, oh my God. And then you assume going into the next show, which is, Revolution, you go, I guess Swerve and MJF at Revolution, huh? And it goes, and then we find out no. Because right after World's End on Dynamite, Sting and Adam Copeland and Ric Flair and whoever's with him come out. And this is like Sting getting ready, right? We're ramping up to Revolution. We're ramping up to Sting's last match. And that's when Swerve comes out and interrupts him and calls out Sting. I want to be the guy who puts you out. Sting, you're not getting a nice farewell. You don't deserve it. Sting, you're not getting a party on your way out. There's not going to be a parade for you on your way out. Nobody is going to put you up on their shoulders. Oh, there will be lights, and they will be flashing, but they'll be on top of an ambulance. Sting, I am going to make sure that your last match, you leave the arena on a stretcher. I'm going to ruin this for you, Sting. I'm taking this from you. And we build to Swerve versus Sting at Revolution. Sting's last match. Sting, they said at the press conference, by the way, 24-0 is what Tony Khan said in AEW. So Sting is going into this thing 3 years undefeated in AEW. And it's his last match. And you could have Swerve, take out Darby Allin on his way to this thing. You could have Swerve take out Edge on the way to this thing. And then when you get there, you want to have the feeling like, okay, Swerve's probably not going to win, but this is a good spot for him, right? This is a really good spot for him. And then he wins. Swerve beats Sting. Sting goes out, tried and true, on his back. Swerve beats Sting in Sting's last match. Swerve gets the only victory over Sting. Now you got Swerve on a pedestal. Now you've got Swerve on the top of the mountain. And where do we go from there? Max. Oh, Max. That's when Swerve starts calling out MJF. post-Revolution, post-beating Sting, post-beating Mox, now Swerve has had that ascent that leads us to him beating Sting. And you've got Swerve, who is on this roll like nobody has been on, who's got all these points. The only thing he hasn't gotten is the AEW World Championship. And then you've got MJF, who's now been champion at this point for what will it have been, 15 months? Nobody's come close to 15 months. MJF has had that title for 15 months. MJF had to go through Samoa Joe at World's End. MJF had to go through Wardlow. And now Swerve is next on the list. I truly feel like it should be February, March of next year. If you've got Swerve at an all-time high after beating Sting, going after MJF in the 15th or the 16th, whatever it is, month of his AEW title reign, it could be the best thing any of them have ever done. I truly believe that if you build up Swerve enough and you wait and you're patient and you tell stories along the way, the story that Swerve tells with MJF could be the only thing that rivals the story that CM Punk told with MJF. That's what I want to see. It's all I could think about. There's two things I could think about coming out of that Swerve match. Number one, the potential Swerve has to be a game changer. And number two, how great is that Blood and Guts action figure going to be at Ringside Collectibles when it comes out? The Bloody Swerve toy. Oh, it's going to be phenomenal. Aside from that, at Full Gear, we got the big news. A signing was advertised. And I think they did tip their hat. I was not at all shocked that it was Will Ospreay. I think they purposefully tipped their hat when they said this is somebody that AEW fans specifically consider one of the best wrestlers in the world. And you go, okay, so it's not like some signing from elsewhere. It's somebody that AEW fans want. And I think Will Ospreay being at AEW is a good thing for potentially for Will and definitely for AEW. You know, I think that Will Ospreay now has a moment, because the thing with guys like Will Ospreay is a lot of American fans know the legend of Will Ospreay, but they haven't actually seen matches. Like I do encounter those people a lot that they're like, oh yeah, Will Ospreay, he's the best wrestler in the world right now. Oh, he is? Yeah. He is the best in-ring competitor. Bell to bell, he's the best. I go, what's your favorite Will Ospreay match? They go, I never actually seen a match. I go, okay, but he's the best. That's not to say he's not the best. That is to say there are more people, I think, than would like to admit that are going to be exposed to regularly watching this guy now that he's in AEW. And I think that that's a really good thing. I think that when AEW started, the whole idea of them being alternative is that they were a spot that would have people like Will Ospreay wrestle Will Ospreay's style. You know, they were a company that could bring to America on week-to-week television the type of wrestling that you saw in the Tokyo Dome, among other things. But that was one of the big things, and I think that there is a place for that. I think that is one of the beautiful forms of professional wrestling. I mean, that's what makes professional wrestling so great. It's so varied. There's so much going on, and I think that Will Ospreay is a big piece of the puzzle. As far as AEW goes, I also think that Will Ospreay, character-wise, is actually more advanced than, again, I think a lot of people realize, at least naysayers. I think fans realize, character-wise, how good he's become. I think there are people who are invested in poo-pooing a lot. And those are the ones that would say opposite, but I don't think that they're speaking out of real knowledge. Because there is something very relatable about Will Ospreay. I think over the years, Will Ospreay has really figured out exactly who he is. I mean, you heard it in the promo at Full Gear. Just rah. You wanted to cheer that. And Full Gear, by the way, the crowd there was awesome. The Los Angeles crowd for Full Gear was an awesome crowd, reacting to everything all night, psyched for cool stuff, psyched for Will Ospreay coming in, cheering the good guys, booing the bad guys. It's everything you could want, you know? The only thing I didn't love about the show, and ironically, it was a story thing. There were no matches on the show that I specifically didn't like. There were some I liked more than others, obviously. But I didn't watch any of the matches on the show, I don't think, and go like, oh, that's not a very good match. The only thing I don't really like, and by the way, the result was fine. Like, all's well that ends well, so it's okay. But just if I'm being nitpicky, if I'm going like, I would have changed this. A little SpongeBob. I don't like messing around with the main event. I don't like, it feels, and again, all's well that ends well. When WCW used to do it, it got really bad because it wouldn't end well. So all's well that ends well, but if it doesn't end well, it stinks. And when WCW would do it, a lot of times it would lead to something that stank. So that's it. So don't get that comparison twisted. I'm not making that comparison because it didn't end up poorly. But I don't like, at the top of the show, the idea that I didn't like the whole setup. I didn't like that the main event was in question. I didn't like that the commentators not knowing if we were going to get a main event or not. It just felt very 2000s WCW. And again, in 2000s WCW, the reason it was bad was because it would turn into something terrible. Whereas on this show, it turned into something great. So it's okay. I just got an icky feeling as I was watching it. Like, we don't know if we're going to get a main event. Maybe the MJF won't be competing. And you're like, are you really not going to deliver on the main event at this point? And then, like, if you're reaching into kayfabe and going, if there's a risk that the world champion isn't going to be in the main event, what kind of promoter puts him on the pre-show? What are you doing? If this was even a slight risk, why would you book him to wrestle on the pre-show to lose your main event? And then they go, Adam Cole comes out and he goes, I made a promise. I won't let you take Max's title. I'm going to wrestle. And somehow Max can't wrestle because he's injured, but the guy who can't walk and is on crutches can wrestle. And you're like, okay. I mean, again, logic would go, Tony Khan should come out or whoever and go, well, you can't wrestle for the same reason Max can't wrestle. Why would I substitute an injured guy with an injured guy? It makes no sense. And then they're going, it's going to be Adam Cole versus Jay White. And you're like, what? Adam Cole's injured, and we've been advertising another match for like 6 weeks at this point, it feels like. And then when MJF does come out, you're like, it's good that we're getting the MJF match, but now the other match that you advertised, Adam Cole versus Jay White, if anybody actually wanted to see that, they're not getting that. So that was wonky to me. I didn't love it. I loved the way it turned out. What I do love, and they're doing great, is that this is now, I guess, every pay-per-view since All In, really. So this is what's that? All In September. This is like the 4th pay-per-view where they've been making you feel like, oh, Adam Cole's going to turn. MJF's going to turn. Somebody's going to turn. This friendship isn't going to last. And then the show ends with the friendship intact. And there's not even a hint of anybody turning on anybody. And you go, oh, wow. Maybe they're just friends, and it kind of makes you feel good. I like that. I like that they're making people feel like these guys are going to turn on each other, and then they don't turn on each other. I think that's awesome and really successful. And the main event itself, once the match got started, MJF versus Jay White was fantastic. MJF has just decided, I'm going to make sure I have fantastic matches. I'm going to make it so nobody can say anything about me. Right? Oh, he's just a promo guy, just a character guy. Well, good. I'm going to go with Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega, Jay White, and just have incredible matches. And that's what he's doing, and that's what he did. And it was fantastic. We did not get a reveal of the devil. I don't think that that's catastrophic. I expected one. I wanted one. Didn't get one. But that's not to say, oh, they blew it. That's to say that maybe there's a different plan for the reveal of the devil. I mean, I do think that I've figured it out. I think that Britt Baker keeps shading MJF on Twitter. Tweeted another thing about how, like, I don't understand why Adam is allowed to walk to the ring, but Or Adam is allowed to walk to the ring, but everybody's trying to stop MJF, even though Adam's the one on crutches. And it's like the fact that Britt is tweeting that, if it's not an angle, somebody's got to call her and tell her to get off her phone. This is bad for business. But if it is an angle, which I think it is, then that's different. I think Britt Baker's the devil. And I think that it's going to make things interesting because, again, I think that it almost allows them to redo the tension between Roddy and Adam Cole, except now it's like MJF's best friend. Adam Cole's best friend was telling him, don't pick Max over me, and it complicated things. Now, I think it's going to be Adam Cole's wife siding with Roderick Strong and all of them, going like, he's not good for you, Adam. And then Adam's going to have to pick if his wife and his best friend are right or if his new best friend Max is right. I think that's where I see it going. Outside of that, I thought the main event was great. And then I thought the title changes I thought Orange and Big Bill and Ricky Starks retaining the titles were great. I think Orange retaining the title is great because he needs this, right? Because otherwise, he keeps getting pushed. A lot of start-stop, I feel like, with Orange Cassidy. So the fact that he retains is excellent. And I like that Big Bill and Ricky Starks retained because, to me, I think that the Golden Jets beat them. I think that the Young Bucks finally beat the Golden Jets and pin Kenny Omega when it's time to win the Tag Team Championship. And I think that is when FTR finally gets another shot. I think that it allows the Young Bucks to go on this journey that will allow Omega and Jericho to hold the Tag Team Championship. It will allow the Bucks to beat Kenny and then get to a Bucks FTR match that is different than what we've seen before. And then switching the two women's titles, I think that was dead on the right thing. Toni Storm, no-brainer. Even though I like Sheeta a lot, right now it's a no-brainer to put the title on Toni Storm. Getting big Mickie James vibes from Mariah May, the obsessed fan that maybe gets a little too obsessed. And then Julia Hart, the ending of that match was beautiful. I loved that ending, Chris Statlander dropping her with the tombstone and then Julia Hart, or whatever it's called, and then Julia Hart coming in and just stealing the pin, just doing just enough damage to allow Chris Statlander to not break up her pinfall. Beautiful. I thought it was great. Push for Julia Hart, I think, has been very, very good. So, yeah, I thought it was good. Really good show. Full Gear was a really, really good show. We got another really good show, I think, coming up this weekend. Survivor Series War Games, and the big question that is coming up is what is happening with this men's War Games match. I think we're going to get into it a lot this week on WWE TV, so hopefully you're catching this podcast the minute it comes out. But I think that the men's War Games is a complicated scenario, right? Because you've got JD McDonough, who's been confirmed as a member of the Judgment Day. After last week's Raw, I think Drew McIntyre is joining the Judgment Day team for War Games. I don't think Drew McIntyre is going to become a member of the Judgment Day, but I do think he's going to be joining the team, which would mean that we need a fifth man on the men's team. The women are doing 4-on-4. We found out that, as I don't think was a huge surprise, but we found out that the Damage Control team, which is Kyrie, Asuka, Io, and Bayley. Obviously, Dakota can't wrestle right now. Is taking on Shotzi. Big moment, by the way, for Shotzi. Talk about a put up or shut up. Talk about like the ultimate opportunity. Shotzi is teaming with Charlotte, Bianca, and now Becky Lynch. Huge star power on that team to take on, I think, a team. This is one that I think that everybody wants the heels to win. I think everybody loves the idea of Damage Control with with Kyrie returning and Asuka turning heel, joining up with Io. I think that we got the LWO written all over this place. I think the villains win. I think they do it in spite of Bayley, not because of Bayley, but in spite of Bayley or despite, whatever. Bayley, they save Bayley and win. And Io and Asuka and Kyrie look dominant. And Bayley is left happy that her team won, but realizing she does not have a leg to stand on in terms of being a leader of this team. And then over on the men's side, the big question on the men's side is, who is the fifth man? Now, if you ask the internet, it's Randy Orton. Everybody all week, again this week, is it time, is it time, is it time? It's not time. And I'll tell you why I think it's even more not time than ever. Because of what happened on Smackdown on Friday. On Smackdown on Friday, there was a moment where we saw the office of Nick Aldis. The door was opened, and what looked like Cody Rhodes was in there. They didn't say anything about it, but everything counts. When WWE is good, everything counts. That was a moment that justified Cody's appearance at the end of the show. Obviously, he was working out some kind of deal with Aldis. What was the deal that he was working out with Aldis? Was the deal that he was working out with Aldis that he was even there, that he was going to save LA Knight? Or was the deal that he was working out with Aldis that he was recruiting LA Knight to come join the men's War Games team? Right now, you've basically got three options, I think, for the men's War Games. You got Randy Orton making a surprise comeback. You got CM Punk making a surprise appearance because it's Chicago. Or, based on what we saw on SmackDown, you've got LA Knight. All three of those are going to get a monster pop. I think you've got to announce it before Survivor Series. I think that there are too many people that would be disappointed by one instead of the other because all three of those would be such popular decisions for vastly different reasons. What do I think? If I had to guess, I think that the LA Knight thing, if it means War Games, it means War Games. But I think that the LA Knight thing goes further than War Games. I think that the reason that Cody Rhodes helped out LA Knight more goes back to what LA Knight said in his promo. LA Knight lost to Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel. People were annoyed about it because it was the same Roman Reigns finish we've seen a million times. And I, at this point, can't blame people for being annoyed by that. But what LA Knight did was he acknowledged, for lack of a better term, that he knows the reason that he lost was because of the interference of the bloodline like so many others. But he wasn't done. And that his plan was to go through each and every member of the bloodline until he got his hands on Roman Reigns again. I think this is potentially what we're going to see at the Royal Rumble. I think that I think that the WWE knows that there are a lot of people that would want LA Knight to win the Royal Rumble. And I think that in order to get the winner of the Royal Rumble that they want, assuming it's not LA Knight, they might do LA Knight versus Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble and spend the next, month and a half building this LA Knight odyssey as he goes through members of the bloodline before he can finally get his hands on Roman Reigns once again. I think bigger picture what's going on here is the WWE saw what happened going into WrestleMania. Going into WrestleMania last year, because I was thinking about this a lot. War Games last year from War Games to Royal Rumble, it's probably peak Bloodline, right? The War Games time. Sami Zayn in the Bloodline and exiting the Bloodline was probably peak Bloodline as it stands right now. Bloodline's not over, so who knows? But as it stands right now, that for me is peak Bloodline. What came of that was that we walked into WrestleMania with two major top baby faces. WrestleMania got very complicated last year because going in, you had people that wanted Cody Rhodes to finish the story, but you also had people that wanted Sami Zayn to get his comeuppance. What was unique about it was that usually when that happens, one cancels out the other somehow, and it becomes a situation where either one could be a bad pick. Either one is going to isolate a certain portion of the audience. But they were able to tell stories and to keep the audience's faith alive enough that there was a trust. And they went into WrestleMania with two massive baby faces. And now, what is it? April, May, June, July, August, September, October, 7-8 months removed from WrestleMania. Both of those two guys are still right there. Sami Zayn and Cody Rhodes are still two of, if not the two, top baby faces in the company. So as it turns out, going into WrestleMania, instead of it just going, in WrestleMania's past, it's like, okay, well, in the 3 months building to WrestleMania, everything's got to be about John Cena. Everything's got to be about Roman Reigns. Everything's got to be about Hulk Hogan. Everything's got to be about Bret Hart. It just go, go, go. They went, oh, when this thing got complicated last year, we ended up with 2 big stars because of it. What if we can repeat that this year? Cody Rhodes is still going to be that top guy over here. But what if we can get a new Sami Zayn? What if we can get somebody going into WrestleMania that people would love to see beating Roman Reigns, but they love Cody enough that he can still be the guy? So you have another the guy. I think that's what's going on with LA Knight and Cody Rhodes right now. That instead of doing what they used to do, which is they would kind of start to try to push LA Knight back because they were worried that the attention would outweigh the attention that they wanted on Cody or whoever the top guy was. Instead, they're using all that attention Cody has to rub LA Knight and to make it go, yeah, he's just as big a star over here too. And when you've got 2 nights of WrestleMania, why wouldn't you want your 2 top baby faces to headline each show? I believe that what we saw on Smackdown was not the beginning of this War Games thing. I think it was the beginning of a much bigger picture thing. I think what we're seeing is the beginning of the build of LA Knight as 2024's Sami Zayn. And if it's successful, post-WrestleMania, Cody Rhodes, LA Knight, and Sami Zayn are all top baby faces in the WWE. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but that's how I read it. And I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's pretty cool. Before we get to our emails, of course, in the news and notes section, a lot of stuff happening. Ronda Rousey debuted for Ring of Honor. Where did that come from? Ronda Rousey was a name that I had on my list of people who might be the person who signed with AEW. I kind of figured it was either going to be Will Ospreay or Ronda Rousey. And then she shows up in a pre-tape match. Now, if you listen to Tony Khan at the press conference, it sounds like, people thought it was a bizarre thing. Like, you get Ronda Rousey and you debut her pre-taped on Ring of Honor. It sounds like that was not a debut or the first match of a deal, but more a one-off. That Ronda Rousey is now going to be working indies, and she came in and worked 1 Ring of Honor match. Now, you could debate whether that's smart or not. Is it worth it to have Ronda on a Ring of Honor show if you have people scratching their heads going, why wouldn't you just have her on the pay-per-view? But it will probably get some eyeballs on the product. It definitely got people talking. And we'll see if Ronda has a good time. Maybe she signs over there. But yeah, it is really interesting that Ronda is one of those people that could be built as a megastar. Like, I don't think there's anything that would be stopping AEW from building her up the same way WWE did in the beginning. But instead, I kind of think she just wants to go out there and have fun. And I think it sounds like she was just like, hey, I'll come in and do a match if I can tag with Marina and work with Athena and whatever, and Billy Starks. And AEW is like, yeah, all right, you can come in for a match. I kind of feel like that's what we witnessed. Speaking of women, you have Becky Lynch added to the War Games match. I just talked about that a little bit. AEW has some cool stuff. A lot of rumors about Dolph Ziggler signing to AEW. I kind of feel like that's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't AEW sign Dolph Ziggler? I think the Continental Classic actually might be kind of dope. The list of names. So what we know about the Continental Classic is it's a round-robin style tournament. It takes place over the next whatever it is up until World's End. But it's a round-robin point-style tournament. I mean, it's basically, it sounds like very similar rules to the G1. It's just AEW's version of the G1. Eddie Kingston joined the pool of talent in that tournament, which means that his titles are on the line. That doesn't mean that every champion in that tournament, if there are more champions, their titles will be on the line too. But what Tony Khan made clear is that the winner of the tournament would get the championship associated. He called it the AEW Continental Championship. But, you know, I don't think that that's official. It might be the Continental Classic winner, whatever. But the AEW Continental Champion, the New Japan Strong Openweight Champion, and the Ring of Honor Champion. That's a pretty decent prize. All three of those titles will go to the single person who wins this round-robin tournament. And the names that we have announced so far are Bryan Danielson, Eddie Kingston, Mark Briscoe, and Andrade. I'm very interested to see who the other 5 names are. But those are 4 of my favorite wrestlers right there. Those are 4 guys that I love watching wrestle. So if you can keep that up, so far I'm very happy with the 4 names you've announced. If you can keep that up, I feel like I'm actually going to be very into this Continental Classic. And then finally, Logan Paul. Logan Paul. Again, it's like I said last week, going everywhere with that United States Championship. A viral video went of him at a pawn shop trying to pawn the U.S. Championship. They're like, well, who would buy this from us? He goes, I don't know. Austin Theory? Roman Reigns? I don't know. He's not on TV every week. He's not going to be on every pay-per-view. But he's going to be everywhere with that title. I saw pictures of him taking a shower with that title on. And I usually don't look at pictures of Logan Paul showering. But if they're on my radar, they're probably on a lot of radars. It's a good thing. It's a real good thing. And he was announced, too, that he'll be at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Don't know if he'll be at the Royal Rumble or not, but not surprised about that either. That in Perth, Australia, Logan Paul will be there. Yeah, they're doing Elimination Chamber in Perth. They're doing the August pay-per-view after SummerSlam, the Bash in Berlin, I think, in Germany. And then they've announced this week Backlash is going to be in Paris, France. All over the place, baby. Global, 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 and wherever you are across the globe, if you want to contribute to the show, if you want to talk to me, if you want my opinion on anything, if you want to pick this big old brain of mine, email the show, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Our email is notsamwrestling@gmail.com. If you've got an email that you want to send to us, email us at notsamwrestling@gmail.com. If you're watching this, by the way, on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. Matt from Missouri writes in, was wondering if whomever you deem the greatest talker of all time also aligns with your favorite talker of all time. For example, I consider Bobby Heenan the best talker ever, but my favorite talker is the big bad booty daddy himself, Scott Steiner. Okay, I see what you're saying. I mean, no, I think for me, I guess I consider my favorites to be the best too. I don't know. Talker is, I mean, it's probably Paul Heyman, honestly. I can't imagine it's not Paul Heyman, especially at this phase. Like, I mean, Bobby Heenan was very unique in the sense that he could be an incredible manager, but also actually be very good at color commentary, like the best. But I don't know, man. I don't know if anybody's touching Paul Heyman at this point. Chris from Atlanta writes in, see, this is what I'm talking about. New wrestling fan here. I went from making fun of wrestling less than a year ago to being the biggest Cody and LA Knight mark of all time. Really hoping LA Nightmares happens one day. Yeah. I as a tag team, again, that might, yeah, I wouldn't shock me. Look at that. Less than a year ago, became a wrestling fan. My question is twofold. And now he's talking about, he's using the word book. He's using the word mark. He's listening to this podcast. Chris, you're an American dream, my friend. How would you book a Cody-Randy feud from Survivor Series to either Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, or WrestleMania? I know. I'm just curious. There's a lot of history there. I kind of feel like having Randy turn on Cody at Elimination Chamber would be a little on the nose. Here's the thing. I almost think that what I would probably do, have Randy come back at Survivor Series. I'm not supposed to fantasy book Randy Orton. What are you doing? You almost tricked me. I'll tell you real quick, but this doesn't count. Randy comes back as a baby. I'm just going to whisper it because I'm not supposed to be fantasy booking Randy Orton. Please And I'm not. This is an idea. I'm not fantasy booking. This is not fantasy booking Randy Orton. Randy Orton comes back at Survivor Series. He's a babyface. He helps the babyface team win. Him and Cody are friends. Everything's all good. He's wrestling babyface matches. He's winning babyface matches. Goes to the Royal Rumble. Doesn't win. Cody wins. Whatever. Randy's still a babyface. Randy's still a babyface. Goes to WrestleMania. Randy's still a babyface at WrestleMania. Randy faces some heel. Whoever. I don't know. Damian Priest. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Cody wins the world title at WrestleMania. Cody shows up at Raw, beating Roman Reigns with the championship. Boom. RKO. That's when Randy turns on Cody. Because otherwise, I think that you don't want to rush through it. You don't have that much time before WrestleMania. I feel like this Randy-Cody feud has so much meat on the bone that you almost don't want to start it until after WrestleMania. And if Cody wins at WrestleMania, could be a good time to start it. Number 2, where did the term tweeners come from? When I first heard it, I thought it was a condescending name, like an insult that one wrestler would call another. Surely there's got to be something better, like gray faces or something like that. Tweener is just like, it's in between. Tweener is in between. In between a babyface and a heel. It's kind of in between. He's a tweener. I don't think that's bad. Chris, keep up the great work, man. Your show has been a big help in learning on the fly. Oh, that's good, man. That's really good. Poncho! Hot takes. Third time emailer here. You don't have to keep track of all the emails. Here's my hot takes. RK Bro Randy is the best babyface Randy we've had. That's not a hot take. That's obvious. What other, as opposed to what babyface Randy? Of course, RK Bro Randy is the best babyface Randy. He was barely ever a babyface. That's a terrible, that's not a hot take at all. It's the most obvious thing ever. Heel Sami Zayn is the most entertaining Sami Zayn, considering he was technically a heel during the Usi segment. No, and again, I don't like your language because it's allowing you to wiggle out of things. Well, no, I like this Sami. I just think he was technically more entertaining as a heel. I don't like that take either, Poncho. Part-time Universal Champion Brock Lesnar was actually great. Every Brock Lesnar. I would agree with that. Every Brock Lesnar is great. I don't disagree with that. I don't know how hot it is. Sami and KO's tag title reign was very disappointing. I don't think that's true. That's a hot take because, I don't think that's true. Jimmy Uso is way more entertaining than Jey Uso since they split. That's not even remotely true. That's ridiculous. Tell me one thing Jimmy Uso has, and by the way, Jimmy Uso is great. Tell me one thing Jimmy Uso has done that's been more entertaining than Jey and Cody saying yeet over and over again at that press conference. Ain't one. And finally, Edge's retirement felt extremely underwhelming. He didn't retire. Poncho, your takes, these aren't hot takes, they're garbage takes. They stink. I appreciate the email, though. I appreciate you listening. Matt writes in, 2024 will be the 10-year anniversary of, in my opinion, the most historically significant non-title match in history, Brock Lesnar versus Undertaker WrestleMania 30. As an expert on the subject, are there any other non-title matches that you see as being close or more important than that match? That's a good question. One that I would probably have to sit with. There's a lot of important matches, but they're title matches. Hogan-Andre was a title match. I'm sure there are, I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. That's a thinker. I'm not saying that there aren't. I would just have to think about it. Let's see. Rick writes in, what's the haps? I have some wild speculation for you. I think Shinsuke is possibly building a faction of sorts right under our nose. Okay. His television feud with Alpha Academy has him beating them all week after week, saying he's expecting someone at Survivor Series. Well, what if whomever he's waiting for is met with a build-up of his new faction? When Damian Priest first became a member of the Judgment Day, what if Tozawa was the person that helped him beat Chad Gable on Monday and play a part at Survivor Series? I don't know. It's possible. I know Tozawa is doing great in his spot right now, so I don't expect this to happen. I would just love if Tozawa was upset about being a comedy act and snapped. I guess, but he doesn't seem upset. We haven't gotten any hints of that. And what about Tozawa would Nakamura be like, oh, I can save you here? Because he loses all the time. As well as Xia Li being built up in as the woman in the faction. She's been knocking everyone out with her kicks. I don't know if she has anything to do with Nakamura, though, because she's been going after other people. She hasn't been going after, if she were going after Maxine, then maybe. Just for a fully rounded out faction, maybe bring in Dante Chen. I don't think this is a very well thought out speculation. Also, Survivor Series is my first ever Big Four WWE Premium Live event. What should I expect differently from other Premium Live events or AEW pay-per-views? Your first ever Big Four. Oh, man. So you didn't see SummerSlam? Oh, to go to? Thanks for all that you do. You're the pod goat. Look, thank you. It's gonna be a great show. I don't know. It's gonna be really good. All these pay-per-views are really good, though. I mean, Big Four, especially when it comes to Survivor Series, is more like for tradition's sake. They're going to fill the building up, but it's in an arena, so it's not like it's going to be a baseball stadium. Michael writes in, howdy, partner, keep on keeping on. Last week, an emailer mentioned selling his WrestleMania ticket due to financial hardships. It struck a chord because we've all been there. The good news is that, according to Brian Alvarez... Okay, I'm not going to read that. That's dumb, Michael. Let's see. This one is from Z? Is that how you pronounce your name? Since Cody brought Jay to Raw, this got me thinking. Cody couldn't finish his story against Roman. And I'm sure Cody has studied the bloodline and saw that Jay has been manipulated by Roman. What if Cody is also manipulating Jay into telling him all of Roman's weaknesses and all of the insides into how he works behind the scenes? As we build the Roman versus Cody 2, assuming it main events WrestleMania, it's revealed that Cody has indeed been playing 4D chess to find a way to dethrone Roman. Yeesh. As Cody is about to win, Jay super kicks Cody and costs him the match, which makes it possible for Rock versus Roman to potentially WrestleMania 41 or SummerSlam. So you want Cody to go into WrestleMania 40 as a heel? Is that really what you're pitching, dude? This is absurd. Although I like Cody, I feel like the Undisputed Universal Championship is portrayed as a crown whereby someone from the bloodline needs to dethrone him. I don't think so. I'm thinking Solo could be the... No, I mean, look. No. Nobody in the bloodline except... Nobody. I mean, getting that title is not about the bloodline. It's the title. You have to go and be the most dominant performer. You have to be the biggest star in the WWE after you get that title. And Solo versus Roman is a match that will happen. Solo beating Roman is a thing that would be good for Solo. Solo becoming the Undisputed Universal Champion would not be good for Solo Sikoa. Although I like Cody, I feel like the Undisputed, right, bloodline to dethrone him. I'm thinking Solo could be the one. WWE would be creating a new star, and everyone in the bloodline would have benefited from his reign. No, Solo has already benefited. Like, Solo, the benefit is done. What call-up has become a bigger star than Solo Sikoa? Solo is already top of the card. Like, what do you mean Solo would then... Oh, finally Solo would benefit. These are terrible. Brent writes in, been listening in Australia with Elimination Chamber coming to Perth. What are your thoughts on the current influx of Australian talent in wrestling at the moment? Sure beats Outback Jack. WWE has Rhea Ripley, Bronson Reed, Grayson Waller, Indy Hartwell. AEW has Kyle Fletcher, Buddy Matthews. I think it's awesome. I love that that these companies are specifically trying to find great wrestlers from these other countries, like figuring out that dressing somebody as a stereotype from a country is not going to get people from that country excited. Finding a great wrestler who happens to be from that country is what's going to get that country excited. Like, what if we could find somebody from Australia that would have everybody excited in Australia, but also is awesome at wrestling, so everybody in America and everybody in the UK and everybody everywhere would also be excited about them. And I feel like that's what more and more we're seeing, and we're seeing it with a lot of different areas. We're seeing it with Australia. We're seeing it with Gunther. We're seeing it with Kairi Sane and Asuka and Shinsuke Nakamura. Like, yeah, we're seeing it with Xia Li. Carrie writes in, I recently defended the 1994 Survivor Series Undertaker versus Yokozuna casket match when a friend who just watched it for the first time thought it was too boring, then too silly. I countered that while on the surface, the ending was a bit over the top, The match was consistent with the characters and match rules at the time. I love that match since it was the first encounter between two of my favorite wrestlers at the peak of their power. That wasn't what are you talking about? That was a rematch. What is your opinion of that match? And are there any other matches that you had to defend your enjoyment? I've had to defend my enjoyment of every match I've ever watched, Carrie. But Survivor Series 1994 was a rematch. Royal Rumble 1994, if that's the match that you're talking about, and actually the match that I prepared. So the Royal Rumble 1994 casket match is the one where Undertaker gets put in the casket and the green smoke comes up through the casket, and then the Undertaker dies and goes to heaven. That's the 1994 Royal Rumble casket match. Then he disappears. Then he comes back at SummerSlam 94 to beat the other Undertaker. Then he goes to Survivor Series 1994 and beats the Undertaker in a casket match with the help of Chuck Norris, the enforcer referee. What I'm trying to tell you is 1994 was a wild-ass time to be the Undertaker. But a great time. I love the Royal Rumble 94 casket match. I love the first casket match between Undertaker and Yokozuna. I love it. And I will never defend something that I love. If somebody's like, no, that sucks, I go, well, luckily you're wrong. Dylan writes in, I feel like Santos had a star-making segment on Friday. Boom, what did I tell you? What are some others within the past decade that, I don't know, I'm not going over more. But you're 100% right. I'm with you, buddy, obviously. Gran writes, greetings, human. Out of the following wrestlers, you have to pick one and erase the other from history. No skips. All right. Sami Zayn or Kevin Owens? Jesus. Sami. Seth Rollins or AJ Styles? Seth. Gunther or MJF? Max. Danielson or CM Punk? Depends on the day you ask me, but today it's Danielson. Those are the ones I'm saving. Man, that was a good one. Avik, Sam, if you had to pick 3 new generation guys that Mattel hasn't made yet, is a Mattel Elite, who would they be? I'd pick Wildman, Savio, and Ahmed Johnson all in red gear. Mantar, Bastion Booger, and Abe Knuckleball Schwartz. Let's see. This one's from Cole, longtime listener, first-time emailer. I remember first discovering on YouTube when you'd interviewed Michael Cole 10 years ago. I loved that interview. My question is, what pay-per-view, documentary, etc. would you recommend to showing a non-wrestling fan? My wife Avery has started to show some interest. I would love to teach her all about this thing I've watched all my life. Furthermore, we have a kid on the way, and I would love nothing more than to show them as well. Well, the thing about a kid is you have to let them find stuff organically. It's not good. You can't, watch this. Well, you're going to like this. You're going to just let them find it organically. Like, my kid loves wrestling, but it's probably just because, like, I happen to have it on. He walks over. He sees what's on my iPad. If there's a international pay-per-view on in the afternoon, he loves it now. He's been to shows. It's great. But I think I did it with my wife, and I've definitely had this experience with other people that I've dated, friends, stuff like that. I think the best documentary to show a non-wrestling fan is Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows. And because it does such a good job of explaining not only how it's fake, but how it's really real. You know, it's because it's a really complicated thing if you're totally foreign to it. That's probably the best documentary for me. And the match, I'd probably show him CM Punk versus John Cena from Money in the Bank 2011. That's probably the one. Because it's a great match, but it's full of great story as well. And then go from there. Yeah, but that's where I'd start. Cole, sorry. This was from Blake. Big fan of the podcast, first-time question asker. I like the way you phrased that. As I'm watching this, I'm currently watching ECE. I don't know what that is. ECW, One Night Stand from 2005. I noticed that in the past decade and a half, WWE has not implemented the three-way dance into its current regimen of matches. I feel as though the three-way dance is much more entertaining than the traditional triple threat. Should the WWE implement this forgotten relic or stick with triple threat matches? I mean, I always liked that ECW did the three-way dance. I think that the reason WWE doesn't do it is, number one, it's confusing to present two different sets of rules to people. And number two, the triple threat match is the fact that one person doesn't have to get pinned can save somebody. Like, the reason the triple threat match is very convenient is because somebody like Julia Hart can real quick pin Sky Blue, and so we can get the title off of somebody without actually having to pin them, right? Chris Statlander doesn't have to get pinned to lose the title. So there's a lot, and a lot of triple threat matches use that in it. I mean, probably the best three-way dance was Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka versus Taz, because Taz was the champion, and he got pinned like 2 minutes into the match. And so now it's like we're guaranteed a new champion. But aside from that unique circumstance, I think probably for storytelling reasons, the triple threat just works better. Nicholas writes in, "Bonjour, boss. I'm happy, and you know why. It's official. Backlash 2024 is in France. Of course, I will fight to have tickets and be there. Of course, wearing Not Sam merch. And of course, we'll report the experience to you by emailing notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Bonus points of happiness. My girl Julia Hart is in line for the TBS title again. She just won it, buddy. Have a nice week. Hey, congratulations on getting you a pay-per-view. Okay, this is going to be the last email. It's from Mike in London. Hope you're well. By the way, I love how many of you guys are emailing from all parts of the world. Like, you have no idea how much that makes my day. When I get something from France, something from South Africa, something from London, something from Australia, something from the States. It is so freaking cool to me that, like, across the entire globe, we can all kind of come together and talk about this wrestling stuff every week. It's such a fun thing that this has evolved into. I absolutely love it. So thank you guys. And I mean that with all sincerity I can possibly mean it with. Mike from London writes in, "Hope you're well. Love listening to the podcast on my way home from work on Mondays. I recently heard in a podcast how your favorite wrestler was Macho Man. That was my first favorite wrestler. I'm a big fan of his for nostalgia reasons. I've been watching some of his old WrestleMania matches and recently forgot how he faced some greats like Dusty Rhodes. Oh, yeah, WrestleMania 5 or 6. Yeah, 6. Ric Flair, yeah, WrestleMania 8, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Honky Tonk Man. Outside of his epic match with Ricky Steamboat, what was your favorite WrestleMania Macho Man match? Mine is WrestleMania 4, with him facing 3 different opponents, culminating in him versus $1 Million Man for the WWF Championship. This was my first VHS double pack I ever owned. In PAL format, I'll bet, dude. I was all about that PAL format when I was living in the UK. Also, what do you think of his match against Crush at WrestleMania 10? I find it to be a very random match on the card, especially considering what the other matches on the card were. Thank you for all that you do." Macho Man was still my favorite wrestler at WrestleMania 10. So I was happy he was on the card. I hated Crush. Crush had lacerated the tongue of Macho Man Randy Savage, which means that he dropped Macho Man across a barricade and Macho Man bit his tongue. But Vince McMahon said he lacerated the tongue. I thought it was very, very serious. At the time, I was super into Macho Man versus Crush. I get what you're saying about it being random, especially because not long after that, Macho Man was gone from the company. But there was a build-up to that match, and there was a story, and also the finish didn't work, right? Because the rope didn't keep Crush's feet up in the air. But my favorite, honestly, and this might shock you, my favorite Macho Man match from WrestleMania is not WrestleMania 3. My favorite WrestleMania match from the Macho Man is WrestleMania 7. Macho King versus Ultimate Warrior, career versus career, is top to bottom my favorite Macho Man WrestleMania match. It might be my favorite Macho Man match. And that's saying a lot, right? Because like you said, WrestleMania 3 was Ricky Steamboat. People still talk about that match. You know, I mean, WrestleMania 5 was Macho Hogan. WrestleMania 4 was the tournament. 1 year after Ultimate Warrior was Ric Flair. Like, this is a guy who doesn't have bad matches. But just the whole story leading into Macho Man versus the Ultimate Warrior, the fact that that clearly should have main evented that show, The fact that he and Elizabeth got together and there was a big babyface turn at the end of the match. Just everything culminated. The fact that it was the Ultimate Warrior's best WWE match that he ever had. All things considered, I just absolutely adore that match. And that's a match that I could watch probably once a week for the rest of my life and be happy. I absolutely love it. If I could recommend two matches, and maybe would be the next one. Money in the Bank 2011, CM Punk versus John Cena. WrestleMania 7, Macho Man versus the Ultimate Warrior. We'll leave it there. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we post the whole podcast every single week. Notsam Wrestling on YouTube. You can also find Notsam Wrestling wherever you get podcasts. If you're listening on Apple, please leave a rating and a review. If you're listening on Spotify, leave a rating. And we'll see you again real soon here on Notsam Wrestling.